Credit to the New York Times, the Washington Post, in regards to this information on the Scopes trial. The Scopes trial was one of the most famous in history, and most spin the story negatively in light of biblical Christianity. Most spin the story that the trial was a defeat in the name of science and evolutionism over religious fundamentalism or creationism. The trial had less to do with science and more to do with religion. It really didn't even have to do with the Scopes, who was just a substitute teacher in a science class who basically got caught up in the middle, had no interest in science, no interest in evolution, and wasn't even a science teacher. The 1925 act that banned teaching of evolutionary theory in Tennessee public schools was known as the Butler Act. A play called Inherent Wind, a theatrical drama, portrayed moral triumph of science and evolutionism over Christian fundamentalism or creation, and really just embellished the story. But basically, the Butler Act forbid public school teachers in Tennessee to deny the literal biblical account of man's origin, to teach in its place the evolution of man from lower animals. The law did not prohibit teaching of evolution of any other species or plant or animal. The ideal to sue a teacher for teaching evolution in a public school was conceived by the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, in New York. Scopes maintained that he did not teach evolution while teaching biology, but a textbook had the material in it. And additionally, he was a substitute teacher for 2 weeks, reviewed for the final exam using the book that contained the material, which wasn't even discussed. Scopes' classroom was never invaded, as the play Inherent the Wind depicts. Scopes cooperated and interestingly had no background at all, as mentioned before, in science or in evolution ideas. In fact, the evolutionist attorney, Clarence Darrow, who was supposed to defend his clients from a law forbidding evolution, coached students to lie and claim that Scopes taught evolution when in fact he had not. Evolution was really muddled in the defense, and the jurors couldn't have even really known what was referring to evolution. It was muddled with ideals of embryology and aging. Darrow ridiculed Bryan on the stand for accepting miracles and teachings of the Bible, and asked the judge to instruct the jury to find Scopes, his own client, guilty as charged, which resulted in a speedy conclusion, and spared Darrow from taking the witness stand to be questioned by Bryan. It was a really interesting case. A guilty verdict was issued after 9 minutes of deliberation, and Scopes was fined $100, and the ACLU offered to pay it for him ultimately. Scopes was acquitted by the Tennessee Supreme Court on a technicality, and the Butler Act was eventually repealed in 1967 in Epperson versus the state of Arkansas. And the guilt and innocence was never a primary concern in the trial. The purpose was to bring the case to declare the Butler Act as unconstitutional and expose fundamentalist Christian views on subjects of origin through a mocking press, and to focus attention of the world on evolution. Even Britain and others were amazed by this trial. The trial lasted only 12 days, and it occurred in Dayton in the Cumberland Mountains of Tennessee. William Jennings Bryan was a conservative Christian prosecutor who had been the Democratic leader for 25 years and ran 3 times for president of the United States unsuccessfully. And his views were liberal for the time, and Darrow even supported him in 2 of his attempts for presidential candidate. Bryan served as Secretary of State under President Woodrow Wilson. Clarence Darrow was a very successful lawyer, specializing in defending unpopular people in radical causes and in very unpopular cases that seemed impossible to win. And the world watched the case, amazed in the outcome.